Okay, get this. You know how we always hear about air pollution?
Yeah.
Turns out the biggest culprit in the UK might surprise you.
Interesting.
I was looking at this report from the Institute for Fiscal Studies, and
Okay.
yeah, and it turns out we've got some really interesting stuff to deep dive into today.
Right.
We're talking air pollution in the UK,
Right.
specifically this PM2.5 stuff.
Yeah, nasty stuff.
It is. We're going to figure out where it comes from, what kind of impact it has
Okay.
on people's health,
Yeah.
all this stuff. And there's some surprising findings in this report.
Like what?
So, for example, did you know that certain communities are way more exposed to this PM2.5?
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's a huge issue. I'm
Wow.
talking about environmental justice,
Right.
all that stuff.
So, I mean, when we think about air pollution, we often picture, cars and trucks and factories and all that.
Right, yeah.
But this report,
Yeah.
it really highlights something, well, maybe less obvious to
Okay.
most people anyway.
What's that?
Domestic wood burning.
Wait a minute.
Yeah.
You're telling me that my neighbor with that cozy wood-burning stove is doing more damage than
Right.
all the traffic on the M25?
The report says that a full 29%
Wow.
of PM 2.5 emissions in the UK come from burning wood at home.
Oh, my God.
And, other solid fuels too, like coal,
Yeah.
that's compared to
No.
17.9% from road transport and then
Uh-huh.
only 16.5% from
Yeah.
industrial processes and construction. So
Oh,
it's kind of wild. So to understand the impact,
Yeah.
I think it's important for people to know what PM 2.5 is.
okay, yeah, break it down for me.
So imagine these microscopic smoke particles, right?
Right.
So tiny that they can actually travel through your bloodstream.
Oh, wow.
That's PM 2.5.
Scary.
Yeah. These particles, they can get deep into our lungs
Okay.
and cause all sorts of problems like respiratory, heart conditions.
Yeah.
And, children are particularly vulnerable to this
Oh, yeah.
because their lungs are still developing.
Okay. So not a great picture there with, microscopic particles flowing through my blood.
Right.
But it's not all bad news, is it? I mean, the report also mentioned that overall these PM2.5 emissions are down,
That's a good point.
right?
It is. Yeah. We're actually breathing the cleanest air in decades.
Oh, wow. That's amazing.
It is.
What's driving that?
Well, there's been a lot of efforts to reduce vehicle emissions,
Okay.
especially in cities, and
Yeah.
those have made a big difference.
Yeah, absolutely.
And interestingly, the pandemic
Oh, yeah?
seems to have had an impact too.
In what way?
Well, think about lockdowns,
Okay.
reduced activity.
Right.
All that probably contributed to cleaner air.
Okay.
We're still, figuring out the
Yeah.
long-term implications of
Yeah.
that whole period.
Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, it's interesting.
So we're seeing some positive trends,
Right.
overall.
Uh-huh.
Let's talk about those wood-burning stoves for a second. I know a lot of people are opting for those, Ecodesign stoves these days,
Yeah.
thinking they're better for the environment.
Right.
Does the report address that at all?
It does, yeah. So the Ecodesign label basically means
Yeah.
the stoves are supposed to burn more efficiently,
Okay.
release fewer emissions,
Right.
and they are an improvement over the older models for
Yeah.
sure.
Okay.
But even with these, so-called eco-friendly options, they still emit 450 times more PM 2.5.
Hold on. 450 times?
450
More.
more, than gas heating,
Wow.
according to Professor Chris Whitty.
Okay, so that's significant.
It is, yeah.
So even if people are thinking about getting a new stove,
Right.
looking at the Ecodesign label,
Yeah,
there's still a big impact there.
there is.
What about enforcement of this? I mean, it seems like it'd be pretty hard to regulate what people are burning,
Absolutely.
in their own homes.
Yeah, I mean, the report found that despite tons of complaints about wood smoke, there was only one prosecution for home wood burning in England just last year.
That's crazy.
It's tough,
Yeah.
balancing personal choice and public health.
Right.
You need clear regulations, but how do you monitor
Yeah.
what people are burning
Yeah, it's tricky for
in
sure.
their own homes? So
Okay, so let's talk about that ethnic pollution gap you mentioned earlier.
yeah, so this is where things get really concerning. The report found that ethnic minorities are
Yeah.
still disproportionately exposed to this PM 2.5.
By how much?
About 6%, and this is
Wow.
even with the overall improvement in
Yeah.
air quality that we just talked about. So
Wow, that's a big disparity.
it is, and it's not just about ethnicity either.
Okay.
The report also shows that the most deprived areas,
Right.
which often lack resources and infrastructure,
Yeah.
they have 8% higher PM 2.5 concentrations.
That's a lot
It is, yeah.
compared to the least deprived areas.
So that raises some big questions
Right.
about environmental justice.
Yeah,
Are we doing enough?
to protect the most vulnerable.
Exactly.
Okay, so big takeaways here.
Yeah?
We've learned that burning wood,
Uh-huh.
even the eco-friendly, kind of is a way bigger source of air pollution than most people realize.
Absolutely.
And we've also seen that, overall air quality is improving.
It is, yeah.
But there are still some big problems when it comes to enforcement
Huge.
and protecting certain communities.
For sure.
So,
The key takeaway here, I think, is awareness.
go ahead.
Understanding where this stuff comes from and its impact.
Yeah.
That's the first step to making, informed choices.
Right.
And advocating for change.
Absolutely. You've given me a lot to think about today.
Glad to hear it.
And it raises a big question for all of our listeners, too.
Oh, yeah.
Knowing what we know now about PM2.5,
Yeah.
what can we do to improve the air quality in our communities? What choices can we make as individuals? And what role should the government play in all this?
Big questions.
They are. How do we regulate emissions and make sure there's environmental justice for everyone?
Lots to consider.
Yeah, lots to consider.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming.